Welcome to a Leader's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Joel Gunn. We've got Kimberly and Gary back with me today. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Last episode was a lot of fun.
It was.
So in the break, we were talking about, actually before the last episode and in the break, we were talking about courage and curiosity. Gary, you want to take us down that path?
Yes, I mean, one of the things is that when I think about that, and Kimberly again can elaborate on some of this from her own perspective, the curiosity. One of the things when I was talking to her about that is that in anything that you do, try to remain curious about what's happening, or just keep that mindset when you're taking it, whether in business, in life, or that. A lot of times we don't really look into things like we really should, and we should be curious about, what is that? What does that mean? Or even about a person, their background, and those types of things. And those will really help you. The courage is just having the courage to do the right thing in the right moment. A lot of times I see that even with leaders struggling to have that courage to take the risk and to be that. I think back on some of the situations and some of the managers and some of the companies and stuff and leaders that I had trained, is a lot of times they're waiting for somebody to give them approval. They're looking for what, and that's even from the CEO. They're waiting for that big check mark from the CEO. I'm like, you're not going to get that. You're going to. It's not going to happen. You're going to have to step up, and understand what it is that you're doing, why you're doing it, and be able to defend the decision. I mean, there's a risk reward aspect. If it's good, they're going to love you for it and all of that. If it goes bad, you're going to have to be able to defend that and understand why you made those decisions. And that also flips in another situation I had with a leader or manager. He was asking me questions on why I did specific things. It's like the Monday morning quarterbacking when I was in this business. And I looked at him and I go, there's two types of decisions. There are what I would consider the tower or the crystal tower decisions from far off. And then there's the frontline battlefield decisions. And this was a frontline battlefield decisions in the heat of the moment. This is what knowledge and the information we had, and that's just why I made this decision. And he kind of looked at me and he goes, okay. It was like he realized, because, if you're waiting for those the commands to come in, they don't always come in at the right time or in the timely manner. And if you're a leader and you're on the front line, you're going to have to do those things. And, and all the fears come up, all the things that you deal with that. But I think as younger leaders, and when I was coming up and those things, you've got to be able to take those approaches with those decisions that you make, understand why you're making that. Could there be fallout? Absolutely. But in business, I don't think you're ever really out there until there's a risk aspect associated with it. And even in your career as well. And that means whether we want to call it faith, risk, however we want to approach that, we've got to take those steps beyond our comfort zone, in a sense. That's where learning takes place. It's outside of our comfort zone. It's in those things, and that's where we're going to grow as a leader. And sometimes that risk is, this could be the end for me. This could be the end of my journey here at this position.
There are some decisions you can only make once.
Exactly. Yes. And this could be the end. And a lot of times, I even tell, from that perspective and being out there, it's okay to get knocked down, just don't get knocked out in life. So you're going to take some hits and you're going to get knocked down, but you're going to get back up and you're going to keep going. Yeah. Do you have?
Well, I mean, I was thinking about both, right? When you talk about remaining curious, I think about Jill.
Right.
Jill Vassar is a ally of ours in our business, Britton Strategies, and she's one of our executive consultants. She has her own business, but we're grateful that she works with us. And she worked with me in my previous job. So we are we can almost read each other's minds, dangerously so. And then bless his heart, we'd had this dynamic, and then she works, the three of us now work together. So that was a whole thing. But Jill is a question machine, to the point where she's a very black and white person and very literal. And so you could be, she was like one of those kids, but why? But why? But why is the sky blue? Why? Why do cows eat grass? I mean, it literally not that bad. I don't mean to be insulting, but we would be in a meeting and it didn't make sense to her. So she was going to pursue it with all of the vigor that she could in terms of questions. But you had to give her credit, because I will tell you, her being a question machine helped us uncover things because of her curiosity. Because sometimes people will tell you things they would have never told you otherwise. I've learned over the years that if you don't consider and wonder, well, what would happen if? Or how could we do that when we normally couldn't? What would it take? And to explore that, those are all manifestations of one's intellectual curiosity. And I will tell you that, sometimes we just had to look at Jill and go, stop. She says, just give me the hand. And stop. And she's wonderful about that. But it is very telling when I work with an executive, or he does, that doesn't ask questions. I cannot tell you how many high-level executives that the CEO said to go do something,
Right.
and they're trying to figure out what they meant. Did you ask them? I learned that so critically when I was, I had a board member who was very earnest about our building out a think tank. Have you done a think tank? Maybe you have. I'd never built a think tank. What does that mean? I Googled it. I do that. So, because I amass a bunch of information, I do a bunch of research, and then I'm like, okay, so there are all kinds of think tanks. They do different things. So I went back to him. I go, what does this look like to you? And so what does success look like to you? And he goes, oh, holding thought leadership events and talking through this and having big topics and speakers come in and all of that. Well, that is not a traditional think tank. Now, had I gone and built a traditional think tank, he might have admired it, but it would not have satisfied his aspiration. So, I mean, that's a really practical example so that I could be successful, and I had to go back and be curious about that. But then sometimes it's just a matter of, I do love to run with people who want to learn about something, whether it has anything to do with their jobs. And that makes them a much more well-rounded person. I mean, Gary has a reading list that's amazing. I don't want to read it, but it's depressing. Some of it's depressing. But it also causes him to be a more interesting person. And there are things I do to engage that thought and make me more well-rounded. So if I'm at a cocktail party or something, I could engage in witty banter. I don't know. But it helps you know things that you wouldn't have learned otherwise. So that's one thing about curiosity, I think.
Well, it also helps you. One of the things is that, and Joel, you do a lot of this, is getting somebody's story. I mean, that's curiosity. Okay, I know you're here, but how did you get here? And where what from here to here? What does that look like? And I've done that with people before, even around other people, and they're like, I didn't know that about you. And they've worked together for years, right? And they start talking. It's because nobody ever asked them the question. But yet they're together and those things. But that's part of it, about being curious.
Well, we were at dinner the other night. I think a lot of people struggle in a social setting or a business social setting, let's say, to engage and to have conversation with people. And there are two things we do well. He does one piece of it. I have the others. That's a good team. One, we're at dinner the other night with people, and he said, tell me the story about your relationship. And my gosh, they were, at first it was a little awkward. We didn't all know each other all that well, because we were trying to mesh two other sets of people. And suddenly the sun came up and conversation flowed in a way. And we learned really valuable things about these people that we were getting to know. The other piece of it is we were at a thing last night, and I'm really good at connecting and saying, hey, so you recently traveled to Greece. I hear they want to go to Greece. Boom, or whatever it might be. It might be something more important than that. So didn't you start talking about that new merger you were working on? Well, they've just been through something you guys might want to talk about. And then suddenly out of that may come business, or maybe it just comes with an amiable evening. But that level of being curious about people, because I also know when I meet people who could care less about knowing me.
That's true.
Or care less about knowing anything that I do.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring that up because we pick up on that.
Oh, yes.
Right. We know when somebody's curious, and often we won't say they're curious. We say they cared.
Right.
Right.
That's a great point.
And yet, really, they were just being curious. And I guess you could redefine it in some way and say, well, curiosity is caring, and caring's curious. So I'm not trying to get into the semantics.
Morbid
there,
curiosity.
and but I'd be curious, Gary. Like, curious. You've found a lot of value in personality profilings and assessments and those kinds of things. Do you think some people are more naturally curious than others? And if that's true, then can curiosity be taught?
Great question.
What's your thoughts around that?
Yes, I actually do think it can be taught. A lot of if you kind of replace the two and you think about big buzzword now, empathy, EQ. EQ is something that can be learned. It's the same thing really about that. When you're talking about caring with somebody, it's really because the reason they feel that way is because they feel like they've been heard. And so, yes, that is a skill. Now, a lot of people may learn that growing up in the family environment or how they've just the dynamics of that. Unfortunately, a lot of engineers don't have that, or other types of technical people. So when they come into that, they really struggle sometimes with EQ types of things. So being empathetic, they don't understand, and part of that is that how they respond. They have to, and part of when I've worked with a lot of engineers, that they tend to believe that I don't want to get down on that emotional level. This is going to take too much time. And so they're calculating that this is going to cost me more time than I have to give right now, which is actually the opposite. I've went through and proven it to people that they're actually going to believe that you spend more time with them because you're actually listening to them. And when somebody really understands and you've really listened to them and they know that you've heard them, there's a connection there. And there's a lot of explanations out there, brain science, all the different things that do that. Just like you were talking about, you feel that connection with them, and you feel like that there's now this relationship that wasn't there, that didn't exist before.
Well, and that breeds trust and grace.
Correct.
They're more likely to trust you, and they're more likely to give you grace if you're not perfect.
Yeah, a lot of the misunderstanding with empathy is people think that you're going to have to give them what they want. And I'm like, no, that's not what this is about. This is about really listening to them and understanding where they're coming from. And that's a gift. When you're doing that for somebody else and you're actually listening to them, you're actually giving them a gift. And a lot of leaders miss this point because when the people understand that you hear them, they know that you're probably not going to do all the things, and the budget's not going to be able to do this and all this. But what they're missing is the fact of that connection and being heard and listened to. Now, if it's somebody that's coming over and over and over again, that's a different thing. But it's the initial being able to get them to connect in that process. So yes, it is something that can be learned, and it can be taught, and it's something that can be developed. It's just whether or not a person wants to do that, and it does take time. It's not going to be something you go, okay, I'm going to be empathetic tomorrow. It's you have to practice it.
One of the things that made me think of that's related to that is, I mentioned that we're earlier that we're working on an organizational assessment for a nonprofit, and in this process, with this leader that's moving on, the staff is having to have direct contact with the board while they don't even have an interim leader in this place. And so we as consultants we're kind of neither fish nor fowl. We're bridging a little bit of that gap, and we're helping to coach the team because we do care about these folks being successful, and also coaching the board. And something came up from one of the team members that it's one of the structure where they really don't have benefits. They get pay, and this person it's due time for their evaluation. And they're like, who am I going to get one? Well, the board is ill-equipped to do an evaluation of her if they didn't have a lot of interaction with her. They have some. But then certainly the new AD walking in the door whenever they are hired are not going to have a clue, right? But this person still needs an evaluation. So one of the things we're having to do, talk about being heard, this is going to be really important, is that as consultants, and this is where I think there's value in that kind of a thing, we're going to help the board have some empathy and some hearing and listening to the team, because the board can't afford to go suddenly put in a bunch of benefits right now. But if they want to retain that staff, there has to be some feeling the staff is that we have heard you, and this is our plan to begin to work toward that. Mm-hmm. And because they need that staff, they need to retain. It's a very small team, and retain them. So it's really important in all of this, as us, as consultants, listening to both sides of these camps, being thoughtful and curious, if you will, about the state of what's going on with each one of them and what will motivate and marry those. So that whole aspect of, I think that curiosity and that ability to genuinely listen, this, when you ask somebody a question, you really aren't caring about the answer. It's useless. It's almost worse than if you just not ask them anything, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what we're dealing with here is we're teaching. The board genuinely cares. I just need them to be more curious about the team and about their well-being and about what that means and what that looks like. So we're going to be doing a little work on that front.
Yeah, and I guess there's different levels or different frames maybe of curiosity. So I've met people, you mentioned engineers before, and a lot of my friends are engineers or geeks of some sort, super curious about technical issues or problem solving or troubleshooting, something, yeah. Right? Not so much curious about people. And so I've got friends that are like be off the charts curious. Right. Like you mentioned, Jill, she's great at asking questions. Like they'll ask questions all day long in a troubleshooting scenario. Yeah. But then you put them in here today, they'd be like, crickets, right?
Can't do it.
Like I can't do this.
Yeah.
And so how do you? I've got some engineers that I've worked with over the years in different settings where they were exposed to, hey, take that curiosity that you have for that circuit and just let me give you a few key questions to use in these social settings. Mm-hmm. And it kind of allowed them to flip that curiosity. Now, are they these super networkers like you are? No. Right? Are they people persons all of a sudden? No. But now they're able to navigate, some social settings a little bit better.
Well, the biggest win is when you meet an engineer that speaks human. And honestly, because we deal with so many engineers, it's a joy. And the lovely thing is the insurgence of women in the engineering field. Now, some don't speak human any better than any man at all. But what I find is that sometimes it lends a different balance to conversations. And so when you're working with a team of engineers, having anytime you have gender diversity along with other kinds of diversity, it tends to balance out a lot of that. But yes, we do a lot of translating in our business of these kind of concepts so that a regular person can understand them. But also you've got to remember, you've also got to, talking about people hearing you, you also have to, like when you're working with a team of very technical people, positioning your language so that they can hear you too, and you provoke curiosity in them.
You both have mentioned being heard. Some years ago, I was working with a leader, and our personalities were very different, but he was my leader. And it was really frustrating because normally I can click with pretty much anybody. But one day we're processing things and both are we're getting a little shorter fuse as the conversation goes on. We're not yelling at each other, but you can just feel the tension. And finally he goes, "Joel, I hear you." I'm like, "Oh, okay, thanks." He's like, "What? What just happened?" Okay. I said, "You said you heard me." And he goes, "That's it? What?" And I said, "That's it. I don't care if you take my idea or not. We're in a brainstorming session. It just felt like you weren't hearing what I was trying to contribute. and now that you've hurt me, I'm good.
It's
Do
good.
with it what you want.
That's so funny.
It changed our relationship, though. That one moment changed our relationship where even today we would consider ourselves friends.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, and before I don't call anybody an enemy, but he would have been one I would be tempted to do so.
You wouldn't go out of your way.
And but he was like he was shocked. He was like, that's it? Like, yeah, I'm done. We're good.
It's so funny. Well, and you talked about two things, right? You were talking about that curiosity,
Right.
but you also mentioned courage.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I know we wanted to share and talk about are some of those incidences that require courage, like joining your husband in your family business.
Some say courage, some say stupidity. You know, it's all about choice of words.
Exactly. I mean, I think don't you think that at any given point along a career trajectory, you either are going to take what's the word I'm looking at? An operational risk, or you do something in your business that is going to do that, or you take a personal risk to make a leap of faith, if you will. And I think there's different kinds of courage, but that was one of the things that for us, our courage is built on our faith, right? Because as long as I know I have the backing of the Lord in these things, that I can do anything. I may not be comfortable doing anything, but I know I can, because I know He's paved a way. He's made provision for that. So that does require, not everybody has that, right? And they're having to weigh their personal risks against what they know. But both are important, right? Sometimes you have to make a judgment call. One of the things Gary says frequently is, in this case, there was no wrong decision. Meaning that there are consequences to either decision. And we just walked through something with someone that the company made a decision that this person did not need to be with the company anymore. The person was aware that certain things were hanging in the balance, but the issue is that either decision, to stay or to go or to keep or to let go, can work out for both situations good. The question is that the players all have a will, right? And so to have the courage as a leader to go, this is not working anymore, even though I like this person, maybe they're your friend, you have to have courage to say, this is the right decision for my organization and for us right now. And you pave the way to bless that person on to another life. Or they could have stuck with it, worked it, and aspired, hopefully, that this person could have had more time to be able to do the changes that needed to take place. So I think sometimes particularly I think as some people of faith, not everybody, but I think I grew up this way, that there was only one right answer, that there was only one way to express courage or one way to do the right thing. And what I've learned over the years is that even though something may be difficult, it's difficult for all of those people involved in that situation, it still was the right decision, right? And so there's an opportunity for grace. My mother said to me one time, when we made the decision, we moved to San Antonio about 12 years ago. And I had this amazing job with Chesapeake Energy. And anyone who knows anything about the oil and gas industry, particularly big players in the oil and gas industry, it is a very lucrative business. And I got reviewed twice a year, and I got bonuses and raises twice a year if I wasn't in the lower performing group. They were fired every 6 months. So, gotcha?
Yeah.
Very competitive, very high pressure. It was literally, I learned more I was only there for a short time, about 18 months. I learned more in that 18 months than I did in the previous 10 years. I can just tell you, it was a very steep learning curve, but I loved my job. Exactly. I was the head of community relations for that particular company headquarters. So, but the thing that we get this, so it was kind of my dream job because I was giving away money instead of raising it anymore. I had raised money my whole career, and that's the job you want if you're a fundraiser. And so I'm doing all of this stuff and lots of perks and, So he gets a call from his company or somebody ask you that he had an opportunity to come run their flagship location in San Antonio. This is 2012. And February-ish.
Yep.
And so we came down here sort of on a spying out the land sort of mission. We didn't tell anybody in our family. We had one set of friends who used to live here, and we let them know, be praying with us about this. So we go down. We're driving out of San Antonio. I'm seeing the skyline, and I know I have to leave. I have to leave the city where I have built a whole career in Fort Worth. I had been there my entire life. I mean, at that point, I was getting on in life, so I was going to be essentially starting over. But I cried, but I also knew it was the right decision. So when I broke this news to my mother, who's had a big stake in my having this career that I had, and she's passed on now, but I said to her, Mother, this is the right decision. It's been all about my career for the last several years. This is Gary's opportunity. It's right for us to go do this. And, I'm as strong a woman as ever, but I also knew this was something God was asking me to do. And she was like, Kimberly, what are you going to do? You have this phenomenal career that you built. And I said, and she wasn't wrong, right? And I said, Mother, I'm doing this because God's asking me to do it. And I said, so he kind of owes me, right? And she was so shocked that I said that. I go, I am, as a wife, doing this to support my husband, and that's biblical, and he has said he'll honor that, and so he owes me. And I said, I will have another phenomenal career. Mm-hmm. Well, fast forward to, all of these years later, 12 years later, we're sitting here. And I'm getting to do these amazing things that I'm not sure, had we not taken this step in the journey it's led us on, that we would be doing what we're doing now, that we love and have dreamed of doing our entire lives. So poor mother, she had to she was like, but she saw we were fine.
You guys are describing, some circles, we call them leaps of faith.
Yes.
There was a lawyer wrote a book years ago that I read, and in there he's telling some stories about his own career path. And he gets fired, and he calls up his grandmother, I think it was, and he's still fairly young, and he's talking with her, and she goes, well, you do know that until you've been fired at least twice, you don't know who you are.
Oh, wise woman.
And wow. That kind of caught me off guard. I fired twice. I mean, my goal was never to be fired once.
At all.
So,
never.
But I don't know who I am until I've been fired twice.
Wow.
And so I that comment caught me so off guard. I've wrestled with that for years. Like, what did Grandma mean when she said you don't know who you are till you've been fired twice? Wow. And as y'all have been talking about courage, I think that's the answer, right? Having enough personal risk-taking, whether professionally, relationship, whatever, having enough courage to be who God's made you to be, to do the best for the organization, right? It took a lot of courage for you to wrap up the last organization. It wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. Took a lot of courage for you to hire your wife to be your boss. Some days you're probably regretting that decision.
I heard a deep breath right there.
I don't know about that.
Some minutes.
The comment on that is that I tend to have a little bit of agreement with that, because I think in life, until you have failures, I don't think you grow. And because I was kind of thinking when you said that, it's very, very insightful. I've been through 3 different layoffs in my career.
He didn't have a job when we got married.
I didn't have a job when I got married.
He got laid off. That'll really,
yeah, exactly. So I mean,
that recommended him to my dad.
That's true love. Hey, Dad, here's a hope. Here's an unemployed.
She's talking about.
He tried to talk him out of marrying me.
Yeah, talking about courage, and that's a whole nother story that we don't want to get into today. It's those types of things though that I think determine what your real character is. And how much integrity and how much resiliency you have. Yeah. The first time it happens to you, you're kind of like in this realm of disbelief, and you don't know what to do and all that. Second time, you're a little bit more prepared. Third time, you're like, okay, this is great, new opportunity. You're ready to move on. Because you've been through it, and part of it is so many people have this fear that, and they may be working right now, maybe talking to somebody. you're working right now, and you have this fear because it is it's the fear of the unknown, and because it's contrary to what we're taught in taking risks and taking steps of faith, having the courage to step out there and do things. And most of it is the worst is I'm going to fail. I'm not going to have enough money to do what it is. I mean, we all in business. Does it ever really get any better? You have bills to pay. You have these are constant things that are there. You just deal with them differently as you go through life, and you realize, why did I worry so much about these things? And that, because those are a lot of times are what is preventing you from taking the step. And that you really can design out. This is the one thing as an executive, you really can design out your life. This is hard for us to understand. Now, certain things are destiny, but to degree of accomplishment or what you're able to do and the parameters and limitations, that's why God doesn't put limitations on things. There's no limitations with God. There's no pie mentality with him. It's an increase and multiple, and it's being creative. That's with anything that you do in life, and that's why you don't see those limitations. So within your giftings and things that you do.
You were talking about sometimes people being so afraid and they're in a current position, and so there's two extremes here. I think that the older crowd, the boomers, tend to stick horrible situations out. They'll stay and stay and stay
Tenacity
because
to the
tenacity, and they'll do it, and they won't leave. And there is some wisdom in calling it. Now, I've done both. I have stuck with something until I knew I had an opportunity to leave, right? I planned for it, I worked toward it, I prepared myself for it, and then the door opened and I was able to exit. And that's optimal, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's so toxic, the cost to your health and your mental well-being and your family, it's too much. And you need to get an exit planned really, really quickly. Mm-hmm. There's that. And then there's the opposite end of the spectrum where we see younger folks sometimes, and this is not 100% true, none of these are generalities, of course, where they hop. And so I don't know if they have, when I look at their resume, I don't rule somebody out because they have a lot of job experience. What I'm looking for is, do you have tenacity to stick it out when times get hard and it's not pleasant and you've got to gut it up a while? Or are you just incompetent and you keep getting fired and you keep moving around, right? Because then immediately I've got to discern, are you just so talented that you have the ability to move? Mm-hmm. But also, have you gained some wisdom along the way? Mm-hmm. And so those are the two things. I'm looking for that in all candidates. But when you see someone on paper, that's what you're trying to see. So what I'm looking for is, does this person who's sticking out a really bad situation, they can be old or young, earlier in their career or late in their career. Later you start getting the golden handcuffs, right? Because there's so much compensation tied up in it. Mm-hmm. But even then, if it's time for you to go, you've got to leave, as you've said before, 5 minutes before they want you to go. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because staying too long, I think, too, is what causes folks a problem. So really, somewhere we need to meet in the middle, where we have the courage to do the right thing at the right time, both not only for us and our self-interest, but frankly for the company as well. I feel that way anyway.
Thinking about courage, there's lots of places people can get courage. If they're people of faith, there's more courage because of the faith foundation. So whether that be scripture in the Bible or the faith community that you're around, or whatever. But what are other ways people could build courage or encourage their courage?
Well, first I want to go back to what you said about people of faith. Yes, they have that, but what I find is most people live in fear.
True.
Period. So the fear is overhanging.
If they're religious or not.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if they're a faith or not. There's this fear in the back of their head. It may be the imposter syndrome that we've talked about before, that people feel inadequate. They talk about a lot of women experiencing imposter syndrome. I meet men who have that as well, where they just feel like somebody's going to find out that they really don't have it to bring it. To do whatever it is. There's that. But I will say that for me, the thing that builds my courage is preparation.
That's good.
Knowing, sometimes I often speak, and forgive me if I'm repeating myself from our previous conversation, is that that you prepare for the job you want. Doesn't matter whether you're 26 or 56. If you have something in mind, you need to, if there's certification that you need, if there is learning, if there's research, if there's just broadening your horizons and talking to people who do that thing, you need to do that stuff. So when and if the people can see you in that light once the day comes. So for me, it's all about preparation, and knowing that I'm good. I can do this, even if I'm a little scared of doing it.
Well, we talk about that because it's and a lot of people are waiting for that opportunity, and the door opens and closes. And I'm like, you have to be, when she's talking about preparation, that's it. Is that you have to, in order to walk through the door, you have to be prepared for it. So when the door, because opportunities open and close all the time. That's the thing that people don't understand. They're just not prepared for them. And that takes, what I'm doing today. And a lot of times people don't see that. They just see the end result that you get to, probably things in your life that have happened that, it's an amazing opportunity. They don't see all the work on the backside that you put in and years to get, that you've put in learning and studying and how you did all this to get to that, what was the book, the 10,000 hours, of experience and things. And that sometimes is lacking, I would say, in younger. They don't understand the hours of experience necessary to become an expert in a career and those things. But if you're working on it, the opportunities are, I guess is going to be the Thomas Jefferson quote that he, about making your own luck. I tend to, I can't remember how that goes exactly, but he tends to believe that, and that's because of his preparation and what he did and how he did those things.
Great point.
And it's those types of things that I think are important and a lot of times missed. When you were talking about EQ, that's part of the preparation. You want to be a leader, you want to do that, you need to work on your EQ skills. You need to work on these things. You need to work on the thing what we call gravitas. You got to have it. That's confidence. You walk in.
Executive presence.
Executive presence. You hear this a lot in when people are doing this or reviews or things. And then people go, what is that? What does that mean exactly? It could be multiple different things. But those are things that you can work on in your career, in business, and that. She's good at interviewing because she's done a lot of interviewing.
I've done a ton of it.
So that's preparation, right? It's
I can spot a dud usually.
So
well, and I bet a good half of your time in coaching is spent on EQ and gravitas, executive presence.
Yeah, I would say a chunk, and mainly because it's there's what I would consider that people have an understanding, not a lot of things that I call knowledge without application. People have a lot of knowledge, they don't have application or experience or actively doing it, and part of that is they may or may not really believe that it works. Meaning like, okay, this is kind of touchy-feely. It's kind of, that kind of stuff. We're talking about engineers and things like that. That's why they don't dive into that, because it doesn't feel solid and hard to them. Well, now,
hard to measure.
Yeah, it's hard to measure, which is not true. Now the brain science is there. The engineers just they don't have all this understanding. Now they're real. Now all the data and everything is backing up everything that's been said 25, 30 years ago. In the neuroscience and the other stuff, and there are hard studies about that, and this stuff works, and the techniques, the tools, and this stuff in the beginning understand how these specific things work. Yeah.
And sometimes you need help. I mean, I'm laughing because I'm not doing an advertisement for him, but but a coach, that's the role of a coach, is to help bring these things out in you and to adapt the skills. They're not going to make you something. They're going to help you identify those things that are natural strengths to you, to build on them, and how to mitigate your weaknesses. And that's what he does so much with his clients. But it's been interesting to watch, and particularly in the technical sector, that executive presence has been the biggest handicap to so many people being able to move on and gain the people to see them as someone who's promotable.
As you guys were sharing, the old phrase came to mind: success is when preparedness and opportunity meet.
For sure.
And so there's a lot to be said there about the preparation piece, and opportunity, preparation I can control, right? And for the most part, opportunity I really can't,
right,
other than being prepared for the opportunity to come along. And so many people go, well, he's just lucky. Well, no, he was prepared when the right opportunity came along, and that's why she's successful.
Right.
But great stuff. Final thoughts on this particular topic?
Just for me, he talked about, I always feel like that opportunity moment is like being at the grocery store and the automatic doors open, they pause, and then they close.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's an elevator, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you are not prepared when that opens, you will be much more reticent to walk through that door.
Mm-hmm.
And the times between when they open and close sometimes don't come along very often, right? And so to the extent that you are always curious, always learning, always preparing, filling out where you're weak, capitalizing on your strengths, and then working on that sort of core heart that it takes to be a really, really empathetic and lovely leader. Everybody's different. They approach it differently. But that is what gives you the confidence when that opportunity comes for you to step up and not feel like, I don't belong here.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Gary, final thoughts?
What's interesting, really a spiritual insight on this, and talking about the preparation thing. And one of the things I was thinking about this morning, and I wasn't sure I was going to talk about it, but I think to close this out, I think it would make a lot of sense, is talking about Moses. Moses went, he had the best education, he had all the right things and all this stuff in being prepared, but was he prepared? Mm-hmm. and then he spent the amount of time that he spent, and then he wasn't really confident at the end. He didn't really have the courage that he needed. He needed different things. He needed structure and different stuff. So a lot, I know this is going to speak to somebody, is that some people may think, well, I need to go to the right schools. I need to do these right things. And yes, all good. But it's being in the right place and being in the right frame of mind and having the right heart and intent in that process that you're going through. And Moses didn't have all the answers. That's the thing that comes back to my mind is that he still needed help. Mm-hmm. And even though he had a connection and relationship with God, there were a lot of things that he lacked in that process. And we don't a lot of times point that out. We just point out the successes and how he was able to do all this stuff and all these different things. But there was a growth. I mean, the amount of time that it took him to come out and grow. And somebody may be in that situation today. You came out of something. You may be at the top of your career situation. Now you feel like you're down here. Those are moments of preparation and growth in your life. So don't discount those, because we all go through those. We don't. Yeah, in our careers and in our life, and some of those are the best growth moments because you actually have time to understand who you are, what when you're talking about who I really am, what am I made of, and those. Do not discount those, because some of those are the best works of and give you internal resilience that you can now overcome stuff. Nobody would have thought that Moses, who he was, would have gotten knocked down to the place that he got knocked down to, and that is a story that is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. If we didn't know that it was true, we would just
Even
go.
Then he had to have help.
Yeah. No, that's good. Thank you for sharing that, Gary. Kimberly, again, great having you on the show. Thanks for giving me some of your time, and the audience, more importantly.
Yes.
Maybe we'll have you back again.
Well,
one of these days.
Always love it. Thank you, Joel.
Great.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us for this episode of A Leader's Journey podcast. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up and remember to subscribe to our channel.